move that the Chair's ruling be dissented from. Madam Speaker, what we've just seen in the ruling you have given is ruling a question out of order without allowing the question to be stated. It's as simple as that. What was given at the beginning of the question set the context for it, and at the end of the question, the Shadow Minister for Agriculture had just started, Madam Speaker, to ask about future action taken by the Prime Minister with respect to the Ministerial Code of Conduct, something which must be allowed, because make no mistake about the gravity of this. We have a ruling of a court reflecting on the behaviour of someone who is now a Minister of the Crown. This is a significant issue which we have a right to discuss within the parliament. And you cannot, Madam Speaker, simply because the preface to the question dealt with what happened to him prior to being a minister, rule that the latter part of the question is out of order when it deals exactly with what the Prime Minister is going to do now in counselling or not counselling, giving a tick of approval or showing the disapproval that the Australian people feel and that a court now feels for the behaviour of the Minister for Agriculture. Madam Speaker, the contempt of the parliament is shown by the fact that the minister concerned himself can't even remain within the chamber while this is debated. The contempt for the parliament is shown, Madam Speaker, by the fact that you as Speaker would not even allow a question to be completed, knowing full well that had the question been completed, it was entirely within standing orders, knowing full well, Madam Speaker, that you were not shutting down a question that was out of order, you were shutting down a debate within this parliament. You were shutting down, Madam Speaker, a discussion about whether or not the behaviour in future of the Minister of the Crown can be consistent with what a judge has now reflected on, whether the behaviour of the Minister of the Crown in future should be allowed to occur in a way that has been deeply reflected on by a court and goes directly to the benefit of someone who is a personal benefactor to that minister. This is a serious question to be asked within the parliament. And, Madam Speaker, the gravity of it I think you knew well when you decided to not allow the question to be completed, because the only moment at which you could have said it was out of order would have been if the member for Hunter had completed at that moment. But he was continuing, and you knew, Madam Speaker, he was continuing, and so you stopped him there. You did not allow a rephrase, you did not allow a completion of the question, in the full knowledge, Madam Speaker, that had there been a completion of the question, it was clearly within the standing orders. A lot of the Australian people, Madam Speaker, would like to know whether the Prime Minister thinks what the Minister for Agriculture did was okay. A lot of the Australian people, Madam Speaker, want to know whether this Prime Minister gives a tick to the future for his ministers to want to interfere in private litigation. Madam Speaker, the email that was concerned was no small matter. This was somebody who was senior not merely on the front bench of his party at the time, but then, as in now, seen as a potential future Deputy Prime Minister when that side of the House is in office. And, Madam Speaker, in that context, it has to be allowed that this parliament is the place where he can be answerable. We know full well from the behaviour of the Prime Minister and by how they scurried out the door that it will appear the Ministerial Code of Conduct will do nothing to improve his behaviour in the future. It appears full well, Madam Speaker, that his own sense of what's right and wrong, given that he wrote the email when he did, shows that he thinks this sort of behaviour is okay. The one place where he needs to be answerable, Madam Speaker, is on the floor of this parliament. And your ruling, Madam Speaker, said that this parliament will allow the issue to be suppressed. Your ruling, Madam Speaker, said that this parliament will make no attempt to pull into line this Minister for Agriculture, that the Prime Minister can't even be asked whether or not that behaviour will be acceptable into the future. Madam Speaker, the way in which the benefactor concerned has provided assistance to the Minister for Agriculture is not limited to him. Gina Rinehart flew 3 coalition MPs to Hyderabad in a private jet. It was not only, Madam Speaker, the Minister for Agriculture who was concerned here. It was also the Foreign Minister, Madam Speaker, the Foreign Minister not present here today, as well as the Minister for Agriculture, who has been a direct beneficiary of this individual, a direct beneficiary who a member of the front bench, seen as a future Deputy Prime Minister when there's a coalition government, is willing to try to interfere in private litigation. Madam Speaker, be in no doubt, every time your rulings try to shut down debate in this parliament, the Australian people know to look more carefully. Every time there's an attempt by this government to cover up, the warning lights go off throughout the entire community. Madam Speaker, there is no way in the world at its simplest under the standing orders that this ruling can be justified. Because at its core, Madam Speaker, you ruled that a question was out of order when it had not been completed. You ruled, Madam Speaker, that a question which you could not possibly know the contents of because it hadn't been said out loud, but you knew it was out of order. Madam Speaker, that sort of ruling makes a joke of the parliament. That sort of ruling, Madam Speaker, makes a farce of this being question time. Be in no doubt, we've sort of given up on the concept that their answers will be relevant. We've sort of given up on the concept, after the ruling was made a while ago, that if we use fairness in the question, anything that relates to the word fair is somehow in. We know that that ruling's been made. But now to be at the point where you won't even allow a question to be stated. You won't even give them a chance to evade and to perform and to cavort and to play the little games that this mob over here play in question time, because you can't even bear to hear the full 30 seconds of an opposition statement. You can't even bear to allow a question to go for the full 30 seconds allowed. You can't even bear, Madam Speaker, for the question to set the context and then ask for the detail of what the Prime Minister will do now. Madam Speaker, it is essential, if question time is going to remain some sort of question and answer session back forth, that there will at least be questions that are not Dorothy Dix's. But over the last few weeks, Madam Speaker, more and more you are ruling questions from the opposition out of order. And today your ruling took it to an absolutely new level, where the ruling was made before the question had been stated. Madam Speaker, there is no way on earth you knew whether or not a question was out of order that you hadn't heard. There is no way on earth you knew. And the opposition handled it the correct way. We rose on points of order and asked, could the question be concluded, so that you could then rule. The member for Hunter asked whether it could even be rephrased, notwithstanding that you'd ruled on something he hadn't even completed. The opposition has made every effort in question time today to not get to the point that we're at right now. But we're at the point we're at right now, Madam Speaker, because of the arrogance of this government and because of the way you have used your position in that chair to prevent questions from being asked. To prevent questions from being asked, Madam Speaker. This is an issue that goes to the heart of the character of people who sit opposite, that goes to the heart of the character of the Minister for Agriculture, and whether or not the Prime Minister, I agree, whether he sanctions what was done in the past prior to him being a minister, if that's what was being asked, it would have been out of order. But you ruled before the question got to the part about it being about future conduct as a minister, which undoubtedly, Madam Speaker, was within standing orders, entirely within standing orders. And so in that context, Madam Speaker, we have no choice. We either accept a situation where this parliament becomes a joke. We either accept a situation where this parliament becomes a place where this government can cover up and be answerable to no one, or we move dissent in a ruling that could not possibly have been accurate for one very simple reason, Madam Speaker. How can you rule a question out of order that you haven't heard?